Ever feel like you're stuck on a financial treadmill, working hard,
Yeah.
but not quite getting ahead?
Yeah.
Like maybe there's a whole different way to think about money that you just weren't taught in school.
Right.
Well, you're not alone.
Yeah.
Today we're diving into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a book that sparked countless aha moments for people seeking financial freedom.
Absolutely.
Now, this isn't your typical dry financial advice book.
Yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki tells his personal story growing up with two father figures.
Okay.
His own dad, the poor dad,
Mm-hmm.
and his best friend's dad, the rich dad.
Yeah.
Each had completely different views on money, which ultimately shaped their lives.
And it's so fascinating to see those contrasting perspectives just highlight the power of our money mindset.
Yeah.
Think about it. 2/3 of Americans struggle with basic financial literacy.
Wow.
It's like most of us were raised with a poor dad mentality focused on job security and steady paychecks.
Okay, that resonates. So how does Rich Dad, Poor Dad help us break free from that?
It all starts with understanding the fundamental difference between assets and liabilities.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about complicated accounting terms here.
Right.
Kiyosaki defines an asset as something that puts money in your pocket,
Okay.
while a liability takes money out.
Right, that seems simple enough. But this is where it gets interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because Kiyosaki really challenges our traditional assumptions about what counts as an asset,
He does.
especially when it comes to homeownership.
Exactly. He argues that while most people view their homes as their biggest asset,
Right.
and in fact 70% of Americans do,
Wow.
it's often a liability disguised in a picket fence.
Okay, so explain that one. Because most of us are taught that owning a home is the cornerstone of financial stability.
It's about looking beyond the surface.
Okay.
Yes, owning a home can appreciate in value over time,
Right.
but you're constantly pouring money into it.
Yeah.
Mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, maintenance.
It adds up.
Suddenly, that dream home is demanding a hefty chunk of your income.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, if not a house, then what is considered a true asset, according to Kiyosaki.
He's a huge proponent of income-generating assets, things like rental properties, businesses, or even dividend-paying stocks.
Okay.
These are assets that work for you, putting money in your pocket even while you sleep.
There's that famous make your money work for you concept. But this isn't just about becoming a real estate tycoon overnight, right? What about those of us who aren't looking to quit our day jobs just yet?
And that's a common misconception about Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Okay.
It's not about forcing everyone into entrepreneurship,
Right.
but about understanding the underlying principles.
Okay.
For example, Kiyosaki emphasizes the power of financial education.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. What does he mean by financial education, and how can we actually apply it in our lives?
It's about going beyond basic budgeting and really understanding how money works.
Okay.
Kiyosaki advocates for reading books, attending seminars, even learning from mentors. He believes that the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to make sound financial decisions.
It's like he's saying, don't just work for money, learn how to make it work for you.
Right?
But reading books is one thing. Actually applying that knowledge is another.
Absolutely.
What are some practical takeaways listeners can use even if they're not ready to buy a rental property tomorrow?
That's where shifting your mindset comes in.
Okay.
Kiyosaki talks about moving from a scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality. Instead of thinking, I can't afford that, ask yourself, how can I afford that?
Ooh, I like that. It's about changing the question to open up possibilities.
Exactly. And it ties back to the concept of assets.
Right.
You might not have a lot of money right now,
Right.
but what skills or resources do you have that could potentially generate income?
So it's about getting creative and resourceful. He gives an example in the book, right, about his first business venture as a kid collecting and selling comic books.
Exactly. It wasn't glamorous,
Yeah.
but it taught him valuable lessons about entrepreneurship.
And it highlights that you don't need a ton of capital to start building assets.
I love that. Reminds me of something I tried when I was younger.
Yeah.
I used to make friendship bracelets and sell them to my classmates.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't $1 million business, but it taught me about identifying a need, creating something of value,
Yeah.
and the satisfaction of earning my own money.
There you go.
Yeah.
You were a young entrepreneur in the making.
Right.
And those early experiences can have a profound impact on how we view money later in life.
Totally.
It plants the seed that there are other ways to generate income beyond a traditional job.
And Kiyosaki would argue that something Poor Dad, despite his education and good intentions, never fully grasped.
Yeah.
It wasn't that he didn't want his son to succeed. But his definition of success was very much tied to that traditional path.
Absolutely. And it's a common perspective.
Yeah.
It's not about saying one path is inherently better than the other.
Right.
It's about recognizing that there are multiple routes to financial well-being.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad simply encourages us to explore those options and challenge our assumptions.
It's about taking control of our financial destiny instead of feeling like we're at the mercy of our circumstances.
Yeah.
But I imagine for someone who's just starting to wrap their head around all this, it can feel a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone feeling that way?
I'd say start small.
Okay.
You don't need to quit your job tomorrow and launch a startup.
Right.
Maybe it's reading one book on personal finance,
Okay.
starting a small side hustle, or even just having a conversation with a financial advisor.
Yeah.
The key is to take that first step and build momentum from there.
It's about progress, not perfection. And I think that's something Rich Dad, Poor Dad does really well.
It does.
It empowers you to believe that change is possible.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that you have more control over your financial future than you might think.
So we've talked about assets, mindset shifts, and the importance of financial education. But Rich Dad, Poor Dad has also faced its fair share of criticism.
Right.
Even a book as popular as this one has its critics. What are some of the common criticisms you've come across?
One of the biggest ones is that Kiyosaki oversimplifies things. Critics argue that he makes entrepreneurship sound like a guaranteed path to riches, when in reality it takes a lot of hard work, dedication, and yes, sometimes a bit of luck.
It's true, the book can make it seem like anyone can become a millionaire if they just follow a certain formula.
Right. But I think it's important to remember that Kiyosaki himself emphasizes the need for financial education
Right.
and calculated risk-taking. He even talks about his own failures and setbacks.
Yeah.
He's not saying it's easy,
Right?
but that it's possible with the right knowledge and approach.
That's a good point. It's not about avoiding risk altogether,
right.
but about becoming more informed so you can make smarter decisions.
Exactly. Another criticism you hear is about the anecdotes Kiyosaki shares.
Okay.
Some people question their accuracy or whether Rich Dad even existed.
Ah, yes, the whole is it fact or fiction debate.
Right. But for me, the real value of the book lies in the broader principles it conveys.
Okay.
Even if some details are embellished, the core messages about financial literacy, building assets, and creating opportunities still resonate.
I agree. It's like those stories, even if they're partly fictional, illustrate important points that can then be applied to our own lives.
Exactly. It's about extracting the lessons
Right.
and seeing how they fit into our own unique situations.
So if you could distill Rich Dad, Poor Dad down to one key takeaway for our listeners, what would it be?
I'd say it's this. Your mindset about money is more powerful than you realize.
Okay.
It shapes your choices, your actions, and ultimately your results.
Mm,
By shifting from a scarcity mentality to an abundance mentality, you open yourself up to new possibilities.
that's a powerful message. It's about taking ownership of your financial well-being and realizing that you have more control than you might think.
Absolutely. Whether it's starting a side hustle, investing wisely, or simply becoming more mindful of your spending habits.
Yeah.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad encourages us to become active participants in our financial lives.
Beautifully said. It's about taking that first step, no matter how small, and starting to build the financial future you envision for yourself.
Exactly. And remember, even Kiyosaki started small.
Yeah.
It's about progress, not perfection.
Such an important reminder. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this episode has sparked some new ideas and inspired you to take control of your financial journeys. Remember, knowledge is power, and even small steps can lead to big changes over time. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deeper.